born in Wagga, Australia in 1927 to Keith and Eileen Lawson. Len had a normal, happy childhood and upbringing. Keith, his father, was a local celebrity, being a talented boxer known as the Wagga Walloper. Young Leonard, known to most as Len, was a gifted student, the brightest in his class, but what he really excelled at was art. He had an inherent talent which he was keen to develop. In the early 1940s, the Lawson family moved to Manly. There, at age 15, Len scored his first commercial success as a comic book artist when he won a national competition run by artist and publisher Sid Miller, himself famous for co-creating the iconic Chesty Bonds character. By February 1945, he had published a full-length adventure comic called Peter Jury, which was included in Sid Miller's monster comic publication, whose subtitle was For Australian Boys. Len is only 17 years of age and has a promise of becoming one of Australia's leading comic artists, reported Wagga Wagga's Daily Advertiser. In September 1946, he married Betty Jameson when he was 18, and they would go on to have 3 children as his career continued to grow successfully. The following month, Len got his biggest career break when he wrote and illustrated all the stories in the very first issue of Action Comics, published by H.J. Edwards Pty Limited. Readers were thrilled by the science fiction tale of Spencer Steele, who was exploring the universe in the far-off space-age future of 1956. Then there were the thrills of speed racer Johnny Starr and the adventures of Detective Michael Justice. He first came to prominence when he created the Lone Avenger, an Australian comic book hero, first appearing in the second issue of Action Comics in 1946. The comic ran for 13 years and sold up to 70,000 copies. He also created the characters the Hooded Rider and Diana, Queen of the Apes, and Peter Fury. By the early 1950s, Len was doing brilliantly. He had a successful career, a happy marriage, and he was earning £70 a week, which is the equivalent of about $2,400 a week now. He seemed to have it all, and many talented but unsuccessful artists were very envious of him. Little did they know that something dark and violent lurked inside Leonard Lawson. On May the 7th, 1954, Lawson hired 5 Sydney models. 2 were aged 15 and the others were 18, 21 and 23. He took several swimsuit photographs which he explained were for a calendar he proposed to publish. The atmosphere for the day was laid back as Len picked the girls up and stopped at St Leonard's to buy sandwiches. He then drove them to Terry Hills, towards Sydney's Northern Beaches area, and walked them through thick bushland. "I am paying for this day's work," Lawson responded, "and you will do what you are told." This sunny day soon took a dark turn. "When this calendar comes out, I won't be here," Lawson told his alarmed audience gravely. "I have cancer." After taking several photographs, Lawson told them he had cancer of the kidneys and intended to commit suicide before the pain became too great. The models were horrified and saddened. "I'm thinking about putting a bullet in my brain," he said. He took a sawn-off rifle from his backpack, loaded it, and declared he was going to kill himself there and then. Scared and crying, the girls pleaded with him not to. Lawson abruptly turned the rifle on them, telling them to all lay on their stomachs. He was going to tie them up, he said, so they couldn't stop him from shooting himself. He tied their hands and wrists and used sticking plaster to cover their mouths. The girls were all frightened, and one of the girls was shaking and became hysterical. Lawson threatened them, saying, "I'm gonna kill myself, and I don't care if I take some of you with me." Lawson began removing or cutting off their clothes. He told the models to lie on their stomachs, took rope from his briefcase and tied the girls' wrists and ankles. He then took scissors and sticking plaster, cut 6-inch lengths and taped their mouths, to stop them screaming, he told them. The deranged artist then pulled them to their feet, saying if they moved, he would put a bullet through their heads. "I don't know why I picked on you decent girls instead of street women," he said remorsefully when he was done. Lawson untied his victims, paid them each their £6 fee, and drove them to Gordon, because one girl wanted to go to a chemist. Lawson acted like what had transpired was no big deal. Once inside the pharmacy, the girl called her parents and the police, who descended and arrested Lawson while he was still sitting in his car outside. Next day, a 15-year-old model told the court that after binding them, Lawson had intercourse with her and another girl. She said Lawson told the other two he would not touch them after one told him she was 4 months pregnant, and the other pleaded with him. The girl said Lawson then had intercourse with her again. The other 15-year-old said Lawson interfered with her but did not rape her, adding she saw Lawson have intercourse with 3 models, including her sister. A police doctor said he examined the girls shortly after midnight on May the 8th, when all had reddened marks around their wrists and ankles consistent with being tightly tied with rope. In the days to come, Lawson gave 7 confessions, but when the case against him on rape charges was heard on the 24th of May, he pleaded not guilty. Lawson's lawyer said the girls had all been willing participants in a burlesque on the theme of rape. Testifying, Lawson said he had sex with some of his accusers, but it had been consensual. He did feel guilty, but only because he had betrayed his wedding vows. He said 3 months earlier he had taken 2 of the girls and 2 other models to the same place and photographed them. He said one of the 2 girls he was alleged to have assaulted had then told him she thought it would be exciting to be raped. The second girl had said she liked the caveman type, and that if a strange man attacked her, she would want him to tie her up and gag her. Lawson said that at Terry Hills, the models had sat around in a friendly manner, discussing sex. He said to one of them, "You remember what we were talking about before? I have brought a rope and a gun, and I'm all prepared." He showed his gun, then told them to lie down so he could tie them up. The girls lay on the ground. I put the gun down on the rock, where it remained for the rest of the time, he said. The girls were giggling the whole time, and appeared to be enjoying the show as much as I was. The jury didn't need to deliberate for long. The Sun newspaper's front page headline simply screamed, "Guilty," with a portrait of Lawson. Found guilty on 2 charges of rape and on a further charge of sexual assault, the judge sentenced Lawson to death. This was the first time in New South Wales that the capital punishment penalty had been handed down for rape in more than 50 years. The judge also said he fervently hoped the sentence wouldn't be commuted by the New South Wales government, as was then standard practice. Betty promptly divorced Len and moved to Queensland for a fresh start. Lawson was quiet and reserved at Long Bay Jail as he awaited the Cabinet's decision on whether to commute his death sentence. One question had to be answered. Was he sane? A government-appointed psychiatrist found that he was, but even so, Lawson's death sentence was commuted to 14 years imprisonment. Leonard Lawson was a model prisoner at Goulburn Jail. He found religion and painted religious images to prove it. He also taught a younger prisoner to read, write and draw. After 7 years and exemplary conduct, he was released on parole. It was to be one of the worst mistakes made. On the 24th of May 1961, Lawson was again a free man. He rented an apartment in Collaroy on the northern beaches and bought a car with money his mother gave him. He had numerous sexual liaisons with women he met casually and also prostitutes he picked up on the street. These encounters did not sate his dark appetites, though. The violent fantasies that were his only company in prison were now increasingly occupying his mind. On June the 20th, 1961, Lenny Lawson visited the Church of England Grammar School in Mossvale, introducing himself to the headmistress, Miss Jean Turnbull, as an author writing a St. Trinian-style novel and would love an opportunity to observe the girls. She invited him to lunch in the dining room and gave him a tour of the school. Lawson visited the school again once or twice, attending chapel and again lunching with the students. Back in Manly in late September 1961, Lawson met and befriended a 16-year-old girl named Jane Bauer. He charmed the teenager and her family, telling them he wanted to paint Jane's portrait. After showing them his portfolio and all the projects he had worked on, they happily agreed. She posed for him several times. At 5 p.m. on Monday, November the 6th, Lawson picked her up at the city art shop where she worked. They then collected her mother, and Lawson drove them all back to the Bauer house in Manly, where they shared an early dinner. Trusted by the family at this stage, Lawson was allowed to take Jane to his apartment, so he could again sketch her. There he made advances to her, but she rebuffed him. But Lawson wasn't going to rely on seductive charm and was fully prepared. Before bringing Jane back to his apartment, he'd filled a sock with sand and readied pre-cut lengths of rope. With Jane sitting on the lounge, Lawson went to the bedroom, retrieved the sock and swung it hard at her head, knocking her out. Lawson then tied her wrists, removed her clothes and raped her. Seeing Jane was coming around, Lawson started to strangle her. When she struggled, he grabbed a hunting knife and plunged it into her chest. Using her eyebrow pencil, he wrote on her torso, "God forgive me, Len." Jane's parents were anxious when she didn't return home. They enlisted her cousin to help in the search and visited Lawson's flat, but no one answered. After a night of searching, they came back about 7:50 a.m. the following morning. There, Jane's cousin broke in and found her body. The previous night, Lawson had fled the Coleroy Flat murder scene in his car. He'd driven south to Mossvale, arriving at around 2:30 a.m., and parked on the side of the road and just sat for a while. He wrote a letter to his parents. "Dear Mum and Dad," it read, "I have done a shocking and dreadful thing. Whatever this monster that moves in my body is, it did it with a vengeance this time." He said he was sorry and that he was going to kill himself, but unfortunately that wasn't what he intended to do. Instead of putting an end to his destructive life, at 8:30 a.m. he drove to the Church of England grammar school that he'd scoped out months earlier. He had a .22 Remington rifle, 167 rounds of ammunition, the knife he'd used to kill Jane, and the pre-cut lengths of rope. Just after 9 a.m., 150 students were in the school chapel, under the supervision of headmistress Jean Turnbull. Through the windows, some of the girls saw a man approaching across the lawn. Suddenly, Leonard Lawson, the author they'd met months earlier, was in the doorway of the chapel, brandishing a gun. He told everyone to be quiet and not to move. "If anyone tries anything silly, one of the girls will be shot," he said. "What do you want?" asked Miss Turnbull. "I'm going to hold the girls as hostages here until 12 o'clock, he said. "I have killed someone already, and I want to speak to 3 people. I'm not bluffing. I've killed once, so now I have everything to gain and nothing to lose by killing more. It's the same penalty I must face." Bizarrely, the 3 people he wanted to speak to were a nun who had visited him in prison, at the time reigning Miss Australia Tanya Verstock, and Olympic athlete Marlene Matthews. Meanwhile, Miss Turnbull furtively scribbled a few words on paper and threw it out the window. "A man is holding us up in here with a shotgun," she wrote. "Get lots of police. He is threatening to shoot the girls." Lawson was on edge, and the teachers and girls were frightened he was about to start shooting. Police sped to the school and approached the chapel. Lawson saw them through the window. "Here come the police," he said, near the door. "Now I'm going to shoot." Miss Turnbull jumped into action, grabbing the gun, trying to keep it aimed away from the students, some of who also rushed Lawson. He started firing. 5 shots rang out. Miss Turnbull and Lawson fought for control of the rifle, while students grabbed at him. Seeing this through the chapel door's glass panel, a police detective and constable tried to get inside, but Lawson had secured the door with a cord. The police constable smashed the glass panel, and Miss Turnbull managed to thrust the rifle barrel through the frame. The constable grabbed it and pulled the gun free. Now he and the detective burst in and subdued the crazed Lawson. Miss Turnbull had painful powder burns on both hands and a hole in her dress where a bullet had passed through the fabric. 15-year-old Wendy Luscombe, a popular student, lay on the floor, hit by a stray bullet. She died in the arms of a friend, the bullet having passed through her heart. Lawson was taken to the Mossvale police station. Interrogated by police, he said he'd never meant to harm anyone, despite a devastating trail of evidence to the contrary, and claimed to have been overtaken by temporary insanity. When Leonard Lawson faced court in December 1961, charged with the murder of Jane Bauer, he pleaded not guilty. Should the case against him fail, he could then be tried for the death of Wendy Luscombe. There was a delay while he was psychiatrically assessed. When the case resumed at Sydney's Central Criminal Court in late February 1962, the only defense witness was a psychiatrist, and he testified that Lawson was sane when he killed the girl. Lawson spoke to the court. "I can't explain what made me do this terrible thing, because I don't know." On April the 4th, 1962, it took the jury 17 minutes to find him guilty of Jane Bauer's murder. With a life sentence a certainty, Leonard Lawson wasn't tried for the death of Wendy Luscombe. In 1962, Miss Turnbull was awarded an MBE for her bravery. The police who'd wrestled him also received commendations. Back behind bars, Leonard Lawson again became a model prisoner. He continued to paint, donating his artworks to charities and raising tens of thousands of dollars. In 1994, the possibility of parole was raised for Lawson, but Wendy Luscombe's brother, along with several of the women who had survived the school siege, protested loudly. The government listened, sanity prevailed, and Lawson remained in Grafton jail. In 1999, Lawson was interviewed for the news program 60 Minutes. He presented himself as a kindly old gentleman who just wanted the chance to feel the grass under his feet one more time again before he died. No one was going to take the chance of being fooled again. By the time of his death at 76 years old in 2003, he had earned the title of Australia's longest-serving prisoner, having been in prison 48 years altogether. He died on November the 29th, 2003, aged 76.
I would like to be forgiven, but I wouldn't expect to be forgiven. They say that unless you can forgive yourself, you cannot expect others to forgive you. Well, I can't forgive myself and never will be able to. All the years that pass, it get easier, but I've found that the more years that pass, the harder it gets.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I can never understand what happened up here that made me do what I did, because it's against everything that I normally believe in.
Firstly, although it is a belated greeting, I wish to wish you all a happy new year. We made it. We made it, my dear fabulous supporters. We're in 2023. Have you made any New Year's resolutions? Well, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I figure that it's probably one that most of you haven't heard of. So I not only want to bring the cases that are well known that I want to get my teeth into and give my perspective, but also cases, that hopefully you haven't heard of. This guy's baffling. I had sort of, when I started off my research, I'm thinking, complete psycho. And towards the end, I'm not sure. Was it, at the end there, he seemed genuinely remorseful, but is it a psychopath just putting on an act, pretending to have emotions? What do you think? The link you will find, hopefully, if I've remembered, I'll leave the link to the interview with him, the full interview. He had said during the interview that the younger son he never got to see. He died in a car accident, aged about 20. The older son never wanted to come and see him. And the daughter came to see him after 20 years. It's a bit sad. What I find peculiar is that he never made any effort to hide what he was doing. With the models there, he never made any effort. He dropped them off. They knew who he was. He was quite a well-known cartoonist. He had everything too. He had, the supposedly the perfect life with the wife and 3 children and the house and the car. He was earning quite a bit. What was going on there? And the murder of that poor girl who posed for him. Again, no attempt to hide what he did. He even carved his name on her stomach. These are not the actions. Normally you think of a psychopath as quite cunning, trying to cover up their tracks. He didn't do any of that. And it's just absolutely bizarre behavior. If he had been shot by the police at the scene, I would have suspected a brain tumor for the erratic and very weird behavior. But there was obviously no brain tumor. He went to live on for decades in prison. Seems like a well-spoken man, quite intelligent from what I can perceive from the interview. What happened? He even said it in the letter to his parents that was he possessed by a demon? Did something take over him? Because I'm going to tell you something else that I didn't mention during the story. So it appears in prison he's a model prisoner. With men, he has no reaction. In 1972, and I will put the appropriate clippings on the screen now, in 1972 they were having sort of a charity event, sort of a show, a theatre, or I think he was displaying his art, which he did prolifically in prison. Anyway, attending this, and I haven't got the clipping in front of me at the moment when I'm saying this, I'm not exactly sure what it was, like an open day or something, was a young lady. Without warning, he has grabbed her. He found a knife and he's grabbed her and told everyone to back out the room or he would kill her. The guards managed to rush him and overpower him. Sadly, some years later, this girl committed suicide, as you can see by the clipping on the screen. So even, I guess it was like 10 years he had been in prison, a perfect prisoner, well behaved, abiding by all the regulations. And suddenly he sees a young woman and bang, he just goes into a different personality and does this crazy thing. I'm thinking he must be an absolutely psychopath and he has no control over his actions sometimes, and that young women were the trigger. Men didn't do it, it was young women that triggered him. Very bizarre, a very bizarre case. Wasn't that Miss Jean Turnbull a hero or a heroine? Fantastic. Wow. She was very brave. Just, without thinking, she just went for him and attacked him. Unfortunately, that poor girl got hit by a stray bullet, but good on Miss Jean Turnbull. It could have turned out a lot worse. It makes you wonder why his initial sentence went from death to 14 years to being let out after 7 years. I do know that some of the models received hate mail suggesting that they had been responsible for an innocent man being sent to jail. It just shows you the type of mindset back then. They really believed him. They thought, well, here's a professional man, a beloved comic artist. Are these girls making this up? So I'm wondering whether that had an influence on his reduced sentence from death sentence to 7 years. It's a big difference. And of course, him being the perfect chameleon, very presentable in court and acting as a model prisoner during his time. But the 1972 incident showed them how dangerous he was. Still, I wouldn't be human if I didn't have some sympathy for him at the end. I don't know whether he was putting that on. I just felt sorry that his son had never come to visit him. But I'm looking at it from my emotions. I don't know exactly if he does feel that emotion that he was displaying. Yeah, so where he was at Manly brought back memories for me, because that is where my parents used to take us for holidays when we were kids. My sisters and I. We lived in the western suburbs where there is no beaches, so we would rent a property out there and go there to enjoy the sand and surf. And here's a photo of your boy, Oddie, enjoying the sun and surf there at Manly Beach. Oh, how the years have flown. Yeah, and also the following image here is of the Manly Aquarium, and I remember vividly this huge shark's mouth entrance that stuck in my mind for years and years. I had actually forgotten about it in my conscious mind, and when I was looking for images of Manly for this presentation, I suddenly spotted that, and I went, wow, I have not thought about that in years. So here is an article, the jail that he was kept in, Grafton Jail. The murals painted by him are going to be preserved. The jail is no longer in operation, and these are the murals that he painted in his cell. Apparently they say scattered throughout the old Grafton Jail. You can see some of them in the interview on the wall behind him. It's not high art, really, but I guess it kept him busy. And so they say the old jail is still classed as operational, but sits empty, so there's no one there anymore. No prisoners are being kept there. There's mixed feelings about whether they should be preserved. Some people think that he was a rat and that the paintings should be destroyed, but they have decided to keep them. I can't see why. The paintings are not doing any harm. Sex killer out of jail to paint. So this is the jail caretaker, Wayne Ringland, said Lawson was one of the first inmates he met. His cell was full of paintings, and officers would bring in photos of their pets and partners, and he'd paint them. Mr. Ringland said, I sat in his cell talking to him for quite a few hours, and he said he was a dangerous man and he shouldn't be allowed out of jail. I guess that was in 94. I'm thinking when he was really old, probably he wasn't a danger anymore, but they weren't going to take the chance. Well, they believe the paintings are history. I would agree. Even if it's a criminal history, it's still history. And someone thinks, I would hate to think those paintings would be painted over or vanish. Well, as I say, there's mixed feelings about that. So the school where all the drama and the terrible, unfortunate death of that young girl happened is closed since 1974. Time has moved on. And there's a few videos on YouTube which explore the abandoned school. Here's a thumbnail from one of them. Well, I think on that note, my dear ones, let me know your opinion. Let me know how you're getting on in the new year. Was Len Lawson a psychopath, a sociopath psychopath, or was he possessed by a demon temporarily? Or a demon that came in at certain times and made him crazy? Let me know. I'm open to your suggestions. All right, my dear ones, take care. God bless, and bye-bye. Oh, by the way, before I go, did you notice the background clippings of the newspapers from 1954? You come across some murder cases that are really lost to time, some bizarre and tragic cases. Did you read that one about the woman who kept her husband prisoner all that time and then ended up shooting him and herself? Wow, there's all these stories to be found in those old newspapers. Anyway, on that note, I'm definitely going. Bye-bye.